Almost there. He's just checking. People are waiting. Such a well-behaved group. Good evening. We're ready to get started. I'm filling in for our dean to welcome you all here for this opening session of the Hayden Center for the fall semester. So I hope many of you have attended these wonderful events in the past, but I hope tonight's program will convince you to do it even more in the future. So I'm Ellen Lapson. I direct the International Security Master's Program and have been a loyal attendee at Hayden Center events. We're delighted that General and Mrs. Hayden are with us tonight. The center was obviously named in his honor for his long, distinguished career in intelligence, and the conversations that are held here, both in person and online, are really wonderful conversations that link intelligence issues to much broader discussion of national security and American foreign policy. Our speakers are often not only former and current practitioners in the national security agencies, whether they're diplomats, military officers, or intelligence officials, but scholars, journalists, and other representatives of other parts of American life that have an interest or a stake in intelligence kinds of issues and national security. So I hope you'll enjoy tonight's event. It's a wonderful lineup. I'm looking forward to it. And my next task is to invite Larry Pfeiffer, who puts these programs. He is the director of the Hayden Center, and he will introduce tonight's program. Thank you.
Well, thank you, everybody, for coming out on such a beautiful fall evening. I got a lot of things that you would probably otherwise do. For those who have been here before, welcome back. For those who have not been with us, I hope this is the first of just many times that you will be coming to see us. So, for those of you who are familiar with Tim Weiner and the books he has written, one question that I got from a lot of former colleagues of mine was, hey, wait a minute. Why is the Hayden Center, why is Mike Hayden, former director of CIA and NSA, hosting Tim Weiner? He's that guy that wrote that book back in 2006, 8? 7, called Legacy of Ashes. Now, Legacy of Ashes won the Pulitzer Prize, so it did not win the Pulitzer Prize. National Book Award, thank you. Won the National Book Award, still pretty good. So definitely a book worth your time reading. I will say when General Hayden was director of CIA and the book came out, we were able to purloin an advanced copy of the book from a friendly bookstore. And we went through the book with tooth and comb, and we prepared all kinds of points to push back on things that were said in the book. And then when that was done, I won't tell you what we actually did with the physical copy of the book. But when Tim approached, General Hayden approached me and some of our colleagues as he was working on this book, we saw it as an opportunity, number one, to kind of weigh in on what CIA has been doing over the last 20 years. And the approach Tim took to us seemed very fair and very balanced. And so we worked with him on the book. We've read the book since. I'm going to tell you right now, there are things in the book I disagree with. There are things in the book that I would tell you a different story on. But this is why in this American republic we have journalists, we have authors who can write these books and engender discussion and engender debate. And I hope that's something that we continue to do. So I encourage you, if you have not bought the latest book, there's a table outside on your way out, on your way into the reception. You can get a copy of the book. Tim would be more than happy to sign it for you and talk to you a little more about it in the reception. Ellen mentioned about the Hayden Center. We were established in 2017. We do these speaking events to put a spotlight on intelligence and how it supports or sometimes fails national security policy makers. If you are interested in our events, if you go to our homepage, haydencenter.gmu.edu, or if you click on the QR code as you're heading out from the event this afternoon or this evening, you can just go in and put your email address so you can get alerted to the events as we begin to advertise them. We are going to have time in tonight's event for your questions. You may have noticed we have microphone stands on both aisles. When Greg gives you the heads up that it's time to line up to ask questions, please politely go and get in line, and we'll do our best to get to everybody's question. I would ask that you put your question actually in the form of a question, keep it brief. If you'd like to identify yourself, and if you've got a affiliation you're proud of that you'd like to mention, we'd love to hear what that is as you're asking the question, but if you prefer to remain anonymous, that's fine too. We have a virtual audience tonight as well. There is as many of you online watching this as there are here in the room. You folks who are online, thank you for joining us. We would also encourage you to ask questions. Use the live chat function in YouTube, and I'll be monitoring that, and I'll find time to try to ask some of those questions as well. The Hayden Center's on social media. We're on just about all of them, so go search for Hayden Center on Blue Sky, Threads, LinkedIn, Facebook. We're not on Twitter anymore for a lot of different reasons. Tim Weiner, welcome. Tim is the author of several books that not only include the two I mentioned that focused on CIA, but he has also examined recent political warfare between the U.S. and Russia. He has looked at the tragedy that was the Richard Nixon presidency. He has written a history of the FBI. He's written a book about the Pentagon's black budget, which I'm actually probably going to go look and find because I think that would be very interesting to read. Hard to find, huh? And he wrote a book about Aldrich Ames, who was an individual who betrayed his country, betrayed the United States. He covered these and other national security topics as well for the New York Times, and before that, the Philadelphia Inquirer for nearly 2 decades. Our moderator is Greg Myrie. Greg is a national security correspondent for NPR, National Public Radio, with the focus on intelligence. He previously worked at NPR as their international editor and as the senior editor for Morning Edition. He is, before that, was a 20-year foreign correspondent for the New York Times and the Associated Press. He has worked all over the world, Africa, the Middle East, Russia, Afghanistan, Pakistan. He's also the author of a book with his wife, Jennifer Griffin, who some of you may know is also a correspondent with Fox News. They wrote a book back in 2011 about their times in Jerusalem. So with that, I will turn it over to our guests to begin the conversation. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Larry. Appreciate that kind welcome. And thank you all for coming here on a lovely fall evening. Tim, we got a lot of ground to cover. Small point, we realized we last met in Jalalabad in November of 2001, days after the Taliban had been driven out of Kabul, and journalists were rushing to get there. So it's been a few years, even though we're sort of crisscrossing in some of the same territory. But Tom, let's go back into the mists of time to start. You first went to the CIA in 1988, I believe, to start what would be, in a sense, your life's work. What was it like? What were your impressions then versus what you see today?
So I was just turned 31 years old, and I worked for the Philadelphia Inquirer. And I thought it would be a great idea to go to Afghanistan, which was then under Soviet occupation. The CIA was in the second to last year of a major operation to arm the Mujahideen the Afghan guerrillas who were fighting the Soviet occupiers of their country. The agency, prodded by Congress, was going to introduce the Stinger anti-aircraft missile, shoulder-fired missile, into the theater of war. And this would be the first time that American weapons were going to be used to kill Soviet airmen and combatants in what turned out to be the last great battle of the Cold War. So as I was preparing to go, I called up CIA's Office of Public Affairs. And yes, the CIA has always had an Office of Public Affairs. And the gentleman in that job was Pete Ernest, who went on to help run the Spy Museum. So I called Pete up and I said, hello, I'm going to Afghanistan to write about this ginormous covert operation you people are running. And I understand you folks sometimes do country briefings for reporters who are going off to strange places. How about it? And Pete, who's a lovely guy, said, absolutely not, and hung up. And so off I went to Afghanistan, and I got back 4.5 months later. And I hadn't been back at my desk in Washington for more than about a day when the phone rang. Guess who? It's my new best friend from CIA, Pete Ernest. Hey, Tim, he says, how are you? And I said, great, how was your trip? Amazing. And he said, how would you like to come in for that briefing now? And I said, I'd be delighted. I was quite thrilled. So drove out to the woodlands of Langley, Virginia, and I parked in the parking lot, and I walked in the lobby, and on the left-hand wall, as you walk in big letters, is John 8:32 from the Gospel of John, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth will make you free. And at that moment, I was hooked, absolutely hooked. I went up to the 6th floor. There were 4 officers from the Directorate of Operations, and I had many questions for them, but they had one question for me, which is, what's it like over there in Afghanistan? Because CIA officers, Americans, and journalists in general didn't go to Afghanistan during the Soviet occupation, because God forbid a CIA officer would be captured or killed, you know. And then I went down and looked over my right shoulder this time at the Gospel of John, and I determined I'm going to cover CIA like I used to cover the cops in the courts when I was a cub reporter. And that was 38 years ago.
So you're getting off to a good start with the CIA, and then you write this little book, Legacy of Ashes, in 2007. You don't, it's worth reading, but I think you can figure out where it's going from the title there.
It was Dwight Eisenhower said that, but never mind.
So now you're writing. You started this book.
Yep.
About three years ago, roughly.
Correct.
Okay. So what kind of reaction are you getting from CIA people when you say, hey guys, I want to write another book? Were you getting rejections or not? And I believe you say you quoted more than 100 people by name.
On the record. It's all
on the record.
Well, about a year in, I came across the name of Jim Kutsana. Jim worked for the Office of Technical Services, which is normally where, if you're an operations officer, you go to get your spy gear. And as the name suggests, they support operations abroad. And Jim had been given the assignment of creating a secret prison system after 9/11, standing it up, running support, figuring out where were you going to put these institutions. CIA was never created to run prisons. And as General Hayden himself said, the next president wants to waterboard a prisoner, better bring his own bucket. But he did, he did what he was assigned to do, and he did it as well as he possibly could. I called him up, cold called him in Concord, New Hampshire, and said, I'd love to come talk to you. And he said, sure. So I drove up to,
He had never spoken on the record before, had he?
no. And I drove up to Concord, New Hampshire. I got to our assigned meeting place, the Common Man Restaurant, and I got there 15 minutes early because that's what you do. And he walked up a couple minutes later and said, "Hey, Tim, how are you?" And I thought, either this guy is a really talented operations officer, long-standing, or how did he know who I was? And I asked him, he said, "Oh, from your author photo on Legacy of Ashes, good book." Very few people said no. For example, I had heard a lot about an unbelievable CI officer, one of the most decorated of his generation, named Tom Sylvester, who was the chief of the clandestine service, top spy. And I called up the CI Office of Public Affairs, which has come to tolerate me over the years. And I said, "I'd love to talk to Tom," knowing that no sitting chief of the clandestine service had ever given an on-the-record interview going back to 1947. And she said, "I'll ask." And Tom said yes. So back I went to CI headquarters, and he sat in a windowless room on the first floor. And he gave me an amazing interview. And I'm glad he did, because Tom had a heart-stopping career, not all of which he discussed with me. Highlights would include being up on a wind-swept ridge in Iraqi Kurdistan in northern Iraq in late 2002, 2003, executing a covert plan to penetrate Saddam's security and intelligence services, which he did. In part by recruiting a Sufi mystic, a sheikh, who had great sway over Saddam's officers. Later chief of station Damascus at a particularly fraught time when General Hayden was director in 2006, 2007. And then being part of an extraordinary event in not just CI history, but American history, which we'll get into later, which began in 2017. Tom was chief of the clandestine service from May of 2023 until very recently. He was slated to go, and this is by tradition going back to the 50s, when you step down as the chief of the clandestine service, your final posting is chief of station London. And John Ratcliffe canceled the assignment. We'll get into the wherefores of the current CI director in a minute, and Tom retired.
We're talking
He
weeks ago.
canceled the assignment in part because Tom had given an on-the-record interview, and in part because Tom did not pass the ideological purity test that has been imposed on senior CI officers since January 2025.
And let me point out, on a related note, so President Trump came into office, obviously, in January. You were finishing up your book, but it was not finished. It was published a couple months ago.
It goes through April.
And the president, when he came in, his, I think, first day or first full day in office, put out a list of dozens of national security officers whose security clearance was being revoked. And then this was before your book came out. I'll be clear on that. But then it does come out this summer, and you said 16 of the people in your book have had their security clearances revoked.
By the Tsarina of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard.
I'd like to note that Thursday,
Unjustly, I might add.
2 days from now, Thursday, will be the 24th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks. and without getting into too much history and relitigating all of that, could you talk about, and this, it was such a good, it's laid out so well in your book, and it's such an interesting read, about what the CIA director and the CIA more broadly was saying about Al-Qaeda in the run-up to 9/11, and then maybe a little bit of comparison and contrast what they were saying in the run-up to the Iraq War just over a year later.
During the 1990s, after the Soviet Union collapsed, I think it's fair to say that CIA went adrift. The CIA is an instrument of American foreign policy. It's the president's outfit. It, with the rarest exceptions, does what the president tells it to do. And senior people, chief of intelligence analysis, people in the clandestine service were saying, what is the mission now that the Soviet Union has been gone? And I think it's also fair to say that the foreign policy of the Clinton administration was, at least in the first 4 years, incoherent. We were going to spread democracy by selling sneakers to the Chinese. That didn't work out. On 8 August 1998, Al-Qaeda blew up 2 American embassies in Africa, one in Nairobi, one in Dar es Salaam. 2 at once wasn't twice as hard as blowing up 1. It was 100 times harder. Precisely coordinated attacks. The one in Nairobi killed 12 Americans, including, I think, 2 CIA officers, and 224 Kenyans. And I flew out there that night. Al-Qaeda had done this at a distance of 3,000 miles from its base in Afghanistan. And if the CIA was wondering what its mission was before that attack, it knew now that counterterrorism was going to replace anti-communism. George Tenet, God bless him, by his own account, he took over he'd been deputy director, then acting director, and then took over in full in 1997. Marvelous guy, beloved at CIA, a backslapper in a city of backstabbers. Used to bounce a basketball down the corridors of CIA and pop into some GS-11's office and say, "How you doing?" They'd be really startled at that point. But George described CIA at the end of the 20th century as half broke, half broken. His precise words, it was a burning platform. You can imagine an oil rig out in the North Sea that's on fire. And he did his goddamnedest to set it right. He spent the next 3 years between August 98 and September 2001 trying to get 2 presidents of the United States to take this threat seriously. He couldn't do it. And by summer of 2001, CIA knew that Al-Qaeda was going to attack. The time and place, it did not know. And President Bush did not take this seriously at all until he did, after 3,000 Americans lost their lives. This was the first transformation of CIA in the 21st century. CIA was not created to be a lethal paramilitary force, but it had to become one. And Greg and I were both in Afghanistan in the fall of 2001, and you would occasionally see an American walking around. And he wasn't from the State Department. And they did a remarkable job in toppling the Taliban from power. And then counterterrorism became the mission. It was the mission for 16 solid years. And I think it's fair to say that it pretty much swamped everything else. Of necessity, I think in the beginning, through General Hayden's tenure, through early 2009. By then, the station chief in Pakistan, John Bennett, was doing something that brutal interrogations did not do, which is that he was recruiting and turning al-Qaeda terrorists into spying on al-Qaeda for the United States. A remarkable accomplishment. And that, as much as anything else, was what beat the path to bin Laden's door in Abbottabad. I will return to this theme, but espionage, which is what the CIA was created to do, can take down a threat better than war. And I think this is where we want to talk about AQ Khan.
Absolutely. Set it up perfectly. Your book has some really fascinating stories about people whose work I was not familiar with. I mean, I knew the story of AQ Khan, and for those, I'm sure many of you know,
Right.
but who I don't, he was.
Well, Greg, that's because they were success stories. And as, again, quoting General Hayden, our successes generally go unheralded. If they go heralded, they're not successes.
Well, so let's herald one here. A woman, Paula Doyle, and what she did in the AQ Khan case. AQ Khan was a Pakistani scientist who helped Pakistan develop a bomb and then became a salesman for nuclear technology.
AQ Khan,
so pick up the story there.
AQ Khan had spent 25 years gathering the materials necessary to build a nuclear weapon. And the Pakistanis exploded the first Islamic bomb in 1998. AQ Khan, unseen, but not for long, then flipped the switch, and instead of becoming an importer, became an exporter. And he would sell to anyone, the North Koreans, the Libyans, and other bad actors.
Iranians.
The Iranians, although, funny thing, the Iranians have been trying to build a nuclear weapon since the 1970s. They never quite got there, did they? Some remarkable CIA technical operations have kept that from happening. So this is the late 90s. This is going in 99, turn of the century, 2001. And the State Department and CIA had been working on non-proliferation for many years. And Paula Doyle, who had been at the State Department working on non-proliferation, was one of the first to see it wasn't doing the job of stopping the spread of nuclear weapons to rogue states. It was time for counter-proliferation. CIA set up a very, very secret unit of about 10 people to work on covert counter-proliferation efforts. And Paula Doyle and her immediate superior, James Mad Dog Lawler. Jim Lawler is not a mad dog, he's a pussycat. And a guy named Robert Gorlick, who'd been a NOC, a non-official cover officer, working without diplomatic cover, remarkable man, basically set up an operation that neutralized AQ Khan and his global efforts to sell nuclear weapons technology to the worst countries in the world. And the way they conceived this is, I think, a great story. So Jim Lawler was attending a lecture at CIA headquarters in the bubble given by Dave Major. You know Dave Major. Dave Major was a legendary FBI officer who had been chasing and generally succeeding at foiling the efforts of Soviet intelligence officers for decades. And Dave Major talked about the Trust. The Trust was the first great operation of the Cheka, the first Soviet intelligence service after the Russian Revolution succeeded. This is 2021, 22. And the Trust was a sting. There were Russian counter-revolutionaries living in Europe. And the Cheka set up fake counter-revolutionary offices throughout Europe. And the real counter-revolutionaries came and they were captured and killed, moths to the flame. So what Jim and his colleagues did was to set up a nuclear weapons proliferation operation in places like Doha. They became part of AQCON's network. Gathered in, intelligence gathered in, people gathered in. They got to the point where President Bush came to CIA headquarters before 9/11, and George had Jim Lawler brief him, and he said, "Mr. President, at this point, the CIA could become its own nuclear state," which wouldn't have been a good idea, but he'd take the point. And they took AQCON down in 2003, just as this, George Tenet called AQCON as dangerous or more dangerous than Osama bin Laden. People were quite concerned because AQCON's outfit in headquarters in Pakistan was about 150 miles as the crow flies from bin Laden's outfit in Afghanistan. And God forbid the two, would collaborate. Jim Lawler, Paula Doyle, Robert Gorelick took down an existential threat of weapons of mass destruction, a real one, just as the United States went to war in Iraq to take down a non-existent threat of weapons of mass destruction. And my point is, espionage is better than war. Way better.
And just to wrap that up, AQCON was put under house arrest and died a few, sort of
No,
house
he
arrest.
died just
a few years ago. No, he just, I think.
Phony house arrest.
Yeah.
But he wasn't selling nuclear weapons technology to Pyongyang or Tripoli.
Exactly,
Tripoli.
exactly. I want to talk about something that is still ongoing, which is U.S.-Ukrainian intelligence cooperation. I've been going there since the war started. I just got back a week ago after spending the month of August in Ukraine. And something I feel, and I don't have all the details that I'd like to have, but is that cooperation. On this particular trip, you could see it in the way that the Ukrainians are hitting Russian oil refineries deep inside Russia. We know there's some levels of cooperation. We don't know on what particular things and where. But you get a sense, you get a feel for that there is a high level of cooperation going. Yeah. It's not something that started in 2022 when the Russians invaded. Can you walk us back a little bit? How did that start? How did it develop?
CIA has been on the ground in Ukraine since 2014 in a major way. Since the Russians seized the Crimean Peninsula and the eastern Donbass. The Ukrainian intelligence services, military and civilian, were riddled with Russian penetrations at the time. And with the guidance of, and there have been several hundred CIA clandestine service officers involved on the ground on this over the years. They purged the Russian penetrations. They helped build up civilian and military intelligence services of Ukraine. And by 2017 or so, the Ukrainians had some pretty good intelligence operations going. At this point, the scene changes, and here's where I want to reintroduce Tom Sylvester. It's the spring of 2017. The Russians have just run what General Hayden called probably the most successful covert operation since the Trojan horse. They have monkey-wrenched the American presidential election to help elect Donald Trump. And they got away with it. There was a new chief of the clandestine service in the spring of 2017, and his name is Tomas Rakusan, Tom Rakusan. Tom Rakusan's roots are Czech. His parents were Czech. And he was 9 years old when Soviet tanks rolled into Czechoslovakia in 1968 to crush the Prague Spring. His feelings about the Russians are bred in the bones. So in late spring, early summer of 2017, Tom called in the best people, the most experienced people in the clandestine service, CIA. And he said to them, look here. And these people had been doing counterterrorism 24/7, 365 for 15 years, basically. He said, look here, I got to clean this up a little bit. The Russians just manipulated our freaking elections. How do we make sure this never happens again? And he said to them, I want you to take the talents that you have honed in targeting terrorists. And by targeting, I don't mean putting warheads on foreheads. I mean, that's me talking. By targeting in this context means, who are they? Who are they at home? What are their true names? Who do they love? Who do they hate? What makes them tick? With the goal of recruiting them to spy for the United States. And Rakusan said to his top officers, I want you to take the talents that you've honed in targeting terrorists and train them on the Russians. I want you to recruit Russian spies, Russian oligarchs, Russian diplomats. I don't care if you don't speak Russian or you've never been to Moscow. That's your mission. And these folks, and at least one of them is kind of a public figure now, Mark Polymeropoulos. He's on TV a lot talking about national security. Second most famous Greek in the history of the CIA after George Tenet. They wrote a manifesto called A Call to Arms. And by God, 4 years later, they had stolen Vladimir Putin's war plans for Ukraine. The CIA had been trying to penetrate the Kremlin since 1947. That was one of its highest goals. And by God, they did. And then Bill Burns, the director of CIA, greatest American diplomat of his generation, and one of the great CIA directors of all time, said, well, I'm going to practice a little intelligence diplomacy here. We're going to tell the world about this. Normally, when the CIA steals a huge secret, it does not tell the world about it. But Burns convinced the president and the Secretary of State it would be a good idea. They did so. And the world, and by which I mean NATO, said, really? Aren't you the people that told us Saddam had weapons of mass destruction 18 years ago? And Burns said, really? Trust me on this. And while this didn't stop the war, I mean, it wasn't just his plans to invade, it was a huge set of plans to create pretexts for invasion. Fake videos, fake incursions by the Ukraine, a political warfare operation, a disinformation operation to set up the invasion. And while CIA telling the world about this didn't stop the invasion, it had an immediate, electrifying, galvanizing effect on NATO. Going back to the beginning of this tale, CIA has been essential to the survival of Ukraine since 2014, a mission that is now very much in doubt since January 2025.
And just to add a little note that you write about, and Bill Burns has talked about, in January of 2022, a month before the war began, he was having to convince not only NATO, not only skeptics in this country, he was having to convince Volodymyr Zelensky that the Russians were invading. Zelensky was not convinced that this was more than a bluff.
Well, you can understand that he didn't want to believe it. Leaders don't always believe intelligence that they don't want to hear.
There's so much to get to here, and time is limited. And so a few more minutes of Tim and me talking, and then we're going to open it up to questions. So please get some questions ready. In just a few minutes, we'll start with those. Let's bring us up to the present moment here.
Yep.
You write about Trump and his the Russia hoax, as he calls it. And you write about going back to the 2016 election, and I believe you say that in the 2016 elections, it was clear the Trump campaign was, actually I'm quoting John Brennan here, but you quote him in the book, that it was clear the Trump campaign was seeking assistance from Russia. You note 38 meetings, 272 email or telephone connections between the Russians and the members of the
Team Trump and Team Putin.
Yeah. Take it from there. Please discuss.
The President of the United States hates and fears the Central Intelligence Agency because the CIA provided irrefutable evidence that the Russians helped elect him in 2016. In 2020, after his first acquittal, after he was acquitted from his first impeachment for extorting Ukraine, withholding weapons in exchange for demanding dirt on the Bidens, he felt liberated, maybe is the right word. And in 2020, he took steps to find what he considered to be a secret cache of classified documents that were hidden somewhere in the bowels of the Central Intelligence Agency that would acquit him of this charge, or in the bowels of the FBI, anywhere in the intelligence community. And to effectuate this mission, to find this silver bullet, he put a 3-term Texas congressman named John Ratcliffe in as Director of National Intelligence. And then he put as his right-hand man a right-wing podcaster named Kash Patel. Groans came from the audience. And these two acolytes, MAGA acolytes, spent most of 2020 trying to ransack the classified files of the United States government to find this elusive document that would acquit Trump. Ratcliffe, as in his 8 months as Director of National Intelligence in 2020, cut off intelligence reporting on the Russians to Congress, distorted intelligence reporting, and it got so bad that in the fall of 2020, General Hayden put out this tweet about John Ratcliffe, and I quote, "This idiot is abusing his office. The head of the Intelligence Committee should be hands-off politics. This is reprehensible." And he went on to say that if Trump won a second term, the United States, quote, "will be just like Russia or China, a tin pot dictatorship." Now that's intelligence analysis for you. Fast forward to the present day. John Ratcliffe is the head of the CIA. He has distinguished himself in the last 8 months by firing everybody the CIA hired in 2023 and 24, ruining the careers of the most experienced and senior CIA officers, eliminating the CIA's long-standing, like 40-year-old diversity in hiring policies. Why does the CIA have diversity in hiring when it hires for the clandestine service well, on the very good supposition that sending an all-white cadre to spy in China or Somalia or Pakistan is terrible tradecraft. And I could go on. I could go on for a long time about what Radcliffe is doing to CIA, what Tulsi Gabbard is doing at the Directorate of National Intelligence, what Kash Patel is doing in dismantling the National Security and Intelligence Directorates at FBI, and what the Secretary of Defense is doing, God help us all. The consequence...
Secretary of War.
The Secretary of War. Lethality, not legality. The net effect of having these crackpots and fools in charge of the most important American national security offices is to increase the risk of a catastrophic intelligence failure. And I believe the world and the situation is as dangerous as it was in the months and years leading up to the 9/11 attacks 24 years ago. God help us if the United States were struck again at home or abroad. What do you think the President of the United States would do if that happened?
Well, that's a sobering moment to pause. I would encourage people, if you have questions, you can start lining up at microphones on either side here. And while they do that, I will toss one more question to you, Tim. What's going on in your take here? Trump, in his own words, calls it retribution. Is it just retribution, or is there a plan behind it?
The last director of CIA, Bill Burns, calls what is happening strategic self-immolation. We're not shooting ourselves in the foot, we're shooting ourselves in the head. Why is Trump doing this? Well, he's trying to take down CIA because CIA fingered him, fingered the Russians for helping to elect him. It's like for 10 years, journalists, diplomats, spies, the American people tortured themselves with the question, is Trump an agent of the Russian Federation? Wrong question. Trump is an ally of the Russian Federation.
We've got lots of questions here. Larry, I'm going to start over here.
Okay, so I'll start with questions from the YouTube audience to get things rolling here. We have two similar questions from Julia and Amanda on YouTube, and I'll just read them. The first is from Julia, says, what would be your positive vision for what the CIA could be? And secondly, what do you think are the agency's greatest strengths currently, and have these strengths shifted over your career?
The CIA's unique mission is to conduct espionage. Espionage is, to quote President Eisenhower, a distasteful but vital necessity. The CIA clandestine service officer overseas is trying to recruit foreigners to betray their country, to commit treason, and to become spies for the United States. It is a bond that is forged both in trust and betrayal. The recruited agent is betraying his country. He is trusting the CIA officer with his life. It takes a special breed of cat to do this work. And the job, Sun Tzu said it in 3 words in The Art of War, 26 centuries ago. Know your enemy. That's the mission. And the CIA is uniquely structured and created to do this. I don't get a lot of, I don't get a lot of response when I call up the CIA's Office of Public Information these days and I ask to talk to serving officers. And you can probably understand why. They're trying to keep their heads down lest they get cut off. You cut off the heads of the best people at CIA, you are asking for trouble.
Yes, sir.
Hi, Tim. I would just like to say it's an honor. I'm Harris Barker. I'm a freshman at the Schar School. I'm a government and international politics major. And my question is, with your background and knowledge on the intelligence community, do you believe that the things that happened in 2017 are still things that are going on currently in the White House now?
Which things?
The one about the presidential election, how he was how he used Russia to help him win the election.
Well, that was a Russian, you mean, are the Russians conducting
Yes.
political warfare against the United States? Does the sun rise in the east? Yes. And the danger is that Trump has become an ally in their political warfare. The autocrat, and I'm speaking here of the President of the United States as well as the leader of the Russian Federation. The autocrat wants you to believe that there are no facts and there is no truth, and you should just give up and go play video games. What do you think happened when Putin and Trump sat down over tea in Alaska the other day?
Nothing good.
Nothing good. You'll go far, young man.
Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Sawyer Cooney, and I'm another freshman from the Schar School of Public Service. And overall, how would you rate the success of the CIA this century?
In this century,
Yep.
compared to
Compared to
like on a scale of 1 to 10?
the Cold War.
Oh, the
or-
Cold War. Wow. America won the Cold War in part because Soviet communism was a rotten political and economic system. Soviets lost the Cold War. And America won the Cold War in part because for all our flaws, for all the things that the CIA gets hammered for to this day, the coups in Guatemala and Iran, spying on Americans under Presidents Johnson and Nixon, for all its flaws, the CIA, in representing America abroad, if you will, we stood for freedom and democracy. And I fear that the lights on the shining city in the hill are going out. And it will be harder to recruit Russians today, to recruit Chinese today, to recruit Iranians today, because you're asking them to share secrets with an intelligence operation whose titular head is Tulsi Gabbard, who is a conspiracy theorist, a Putin acolyte, and a crackpot. A wise man once said, he who lives by the crystal ball will wind up eating broken glass. So it's very hard to predict, but we're still standing as a country. We're about to celebrate our 250th anniversary as a representative democracy. We hope.
Hi, Tim. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Hi.
My name is Ritvik. I'm also a freshman at the Schar School of Policy and Government. And my question is, should the CIA participate in overthrowing a foreign government, and should the CIA be meddling in foreign governments?
Trying to remember the last time the CIA overthrew a foreign government. (1954) That was Iran. That didn't turn out well in the long run. The overthrow of a foreign government, I believe, in this day and age, couldn't be effectuated by the CIA as an institution. Presidents tend to send in the Marines when they want to overthrow a country. And one of the 20,000 things that I worry about nowadays, vis-a-vis CIA, is, as I said earlier, the CIA is an instrument of American foreign policy. It is an executor of American foreign policy. And, you know, it is exquisitely sensitive to presidential command and control. It doesn't dream up things to do. I mean, it's not like a couple of CIA officers were on their second martini in 1960 and one of them said to the other, hey, I got a good idea, let's go kill Fidel Castro. That didn't happen. It was President Eisenhower and John F. Kennedy and his brother Bobby who wanted Castro dead. The foreign policy of the United States at this moment, as far as I can tell, would include overthrowing Greenland. To overthrow Greenland, you would have to subvert the government of Denmark, which is Greenland's protector. Denmark is a NATO ally. Would I put it past this president to order the CIA to do that? I would not. Would the CIA do it? I don't know. I made a flip remark about the Secretary of War, Defense, making a remark in the Oval Office the other day saying, we're about lethality, not legality. Well, he's able to do that in part, Hegseth is, because he fired all the JAGs, the Judge Advocates General, and put his personal lawyer in their place. If a military officer and a CIA officer swear the same oath to the Constitution, not the president. And if they are given an illegal order, and they know it's an illegal order, it would help to have actually a lawyer to tell them it's an illegal order. Their oath requires them to throw down their stars. Do you know what I mean when I say throw down their stars?
Not accept the order and disobey it.
Take the stars off their epaulette and throw it down.
Yeah.
It's going to be an interesting 3.5 years, man.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Gregg. My name is Tyrell Mitchell. I'm also a freshman at the Schar School in Government and Policy. My question for you is, what is something that you've done since college that has stuck with you, that's allowed you to succeed and get to the position you are right now?
That's in college? Did you say?
Since college.
Oh, since college.
Yes.
Huh. How about before college?
We can go before college
Okay.
too.
Because I became a newspaper reporter as soon as I got out of school. And, you know, it took me years to learn how to write a simple declarative sentence. That helps a lot. When I was a teenager, way back in the 20th century, I used to hitchhike across the country, coast to coast, 14, 15, 16 years old. My poor mother. But I always got picked up. And people pick you up when you're hitchhiking, not generally out of the milk of human kindness, but because they're bored. It's a big country. It's a long way from Indianapolis to Salt Lake City. And they want to talk about the most fascinating thing in the world, which is eso, themselves. But often as not, they're inarticulate on the subject, and you have to ask them questions. You have to draw them out. And I didn't know what I was doing. I was a teenager, but that's how I learned to do an interview. And to try and have some empathy for the person I'm interviewing. To try and understand what makes them tick. A quality, I would add, that is very useful if you're a CIA covert operations officer.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Hello, sir. My name is Montgomery Vanek. I'm also in the SHAR School. I'm from the state of Ohio. I want to thank you today for your time. This has been extremely interesting. My question for you today is about the Iranian threat. It seems like whether it's president to president or even the same president, that we don't always have the same policy when it comes to the Iranians. And my thought process behind that is in 2019, they attacked our bases in Erbil and Baghdad in Iraq. And I didn't think we had the response that I thought we would have. And I'm not sure if we handled that correctly. And then obviously recently, I'm not even sure if we handled the recent Iranian issue, let's say, correctly. And so my question to you is, what do you think our policy is towards the Iranians, and what do you think it should be?
At this present moment,
Yes, that's correct.
let the Israelis handle it, is, I think, the policy of the United States on that issue.
Okay.
Let them assassinate the nuclear scientists. Let them blow up Iran's allies. And hope it doesn't get into a, World War III.
Thank you.
Sorry about that.
Hi, it's a pleasure to meet both of you. I'm a freshman as a government and international politics major. You were talking about the Russian influence on the 2016 American election. It seems to me like a lot of that was thanks to the sophistication of Russian intelligence regarding, computers and internet systems. I was just wondering if you think the American intelligence has caught up to that level of sophistication and counterintelligence, or just intelligence?
That is a great question. The success of the Russian operation to monkey wrench the 2016 election had several facets. They were able to use Facebook and Twitter to find wedge issues that and rub salt in the open wounds of the American body politic to pit us against each other with the higher purpose of denigrating Hillary Clinton and elevating Donald Trump. They had people very high up in the Trump campaign, including his first campaign manager, Paul Manafort, who was, if he wasn't a Russian agent, I'll eat my shoe. His business partner was an actual Russian intelligence officer named Konstantin Kilimnik. Is that right?
Khmelny.
Khmelny. And he also, the operation, the technical sophistication of the operation that penetrated the Democratic National Committee's servers and spread, I don't know how many tens of thousands documents, out into the political theater like so much poison confetti. And I must say, I never covered politics. I want to absolve myself for this. The Washington press corps that covered politics was looking at this like a kid looking at fireworks on the 4th of July. Like, wow, man. Without stopping to think, who is doing this? Why is this happening? Right? Don't get me started. But above all, their chosen candidate got up as soon as this was public and said, Russia, if you're listening, and they were listening. Hours later, they had another deep computer penetration of the DNC in the campaign. Without wanting to scare the bejesus out of you, okay? The sophistication of Chinese and Russian cyber operations in particular against the United States is staggering. In 2014, the Chinese penetrated the Office of Personnel Management, that's the, US government HR, right? And it stole the personnel records of 22.5 million people who work for the government of the United States, including everybody who worked in the intelligence community and their security clearance files with, personal data like fingerprints and passport data. They then took those specific files of people who looked like they were intelligence officers, and they cross-indexed it with biometric data that they had stolen from the world's international airports. They shoot your eye, they take pictures of your eyeballs. They gave it all to Alibaba to crunch, which it did in 90 days. And today, ever since, if you are a CIA operations officer newly arrived for a tour in Beijing or Kuala Lumpur or Ouagadougou, often, you're more than likely not to have a Chinese intelligence officer say hi at the luggage carousel and say, hey, Joe, how you doing? There's much more. The Chinese have penetrated all the major US telecoms. They have an ongoing operation called Salt Typhoon that has sucked up information on every American. Why are they doing this? To achieve information dominance over the United States. Xi, the Chinese leader, said shortly after he took power, data is the new oil. So in a crisis, God help us, or a confrontation, they have a map, an information map of the battlefield, which is us. So the Chinese, after Sun Tzu, they want to know us. The Russians just want to screw us. And that is the fundamental difference between their two intelligence services.
There's some great questions here. Larry, do you want to?
We'll take one more.
Okay, we'll take.
Oh,
take one
man,
more.
really?
These are good questions.
Come on.
Lightning rounds. Lightning rounds. Quick questions, quick answers here.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Hi there, I'm James. It was wonderful hearing you speak.
Thank
And
you.
so you sort of covered this with the last answer, but I wanted to ask for a little more detail, I guess. You've talked a lot about Russia tonight, and so going forward, having to sort of juggle both the Russian and Chinese state interests and intelligence communities, which I don't want to force you into a decision, I guess, but which would you say is of greater importance to manage?
Are the Russians or the Chinese the greater threat? You're asking me?
Yeah, going forward.
Okay. Going forward decades?
whatever frame makes
China.
it easiest.
Hi, Oswaldo
Thank you.
Silva. I'm in the MA in International Security here. Thanks for being here with us and sharing insightful perspective. You've mentioned the risks to national security posed by a diminished and perhaps demoralized intelligence apparatus, but should we also be concerned about the opposite risk of that apparatus being co-opted to serve an authoritarian project here or into serving illiberal regimes abroad?
I will now quote the great songwriter and poet Leonard Cohen. You want it darker? The Supreme Court ruled last year that a president cannot be prosecuted for crimes committed in the ambit of his power in office. What that means, in effect, and I'm paraphrasing Justice Sotomayor's dissent in this case, that if the President of the United States were to order the assassination of a domestic political rival, he would probably get away with it. It is an intelligence service under the command of a lawless president is a great danger. Presidents Johnson and Nixon ordered the CIA to spy on Americans. President Reagan ordered the CIA to help sell weapons to the Iranian National Revolutionary Guard, overcharge them 600%, skim the proceeds, and backhand it to the Contras in Central America. And President Bush has been criticized for violating the Geneva Conventions and the laws of God and man in his counterterrorism operations after 9/11. I will go back to something I said earlier. The CIA is incredibly responsive and sensitive to presidential commands. Should this president order the CIA to do something that would violate officers and analysts' oath to the Constitution, I believe that they would throw down their stars. And I am terrified to think what would happen if they did not.
Thank you.
Larry?
Okay, so I apologize to those of you still standing. I encourage you to come to the reception and corner Tim or Greg with your questions and continue the conversation over there. Before we go, I did want to acknowledge one additional guest we have in our audience. Here in the front row is the Honorable J.D. Spain. He is one of the board members of Arlington County. And so if you're from Arlington and you got any questions about what's going on, please check him out. And thanks for coming out and supporting what we do here in this county. There you go, Semper Fi. So with that, I want to thank Greg for a great moderation job here.
Appreciate it.
And I'd like to thank Tim for taking time out of his busy book tour schedule to come and find time to spend with us. The book is available in the hallway as you make your way towards the reception. I think I solved the PayPal problem that some of you may have encountered earlier, so if you weren't able to buy before and you want to swing by and buy again, please do. But PayPal, Venmo, unfortunately, we're just doing electronic payments. We didn't want to really deal with cash. I apologize for that. With that, we've got a reception across the way, free food, free drinks, alcohol costs a little money. Apologies for that, but it's just the nature of academia today. Please join me in a final round of applause for our guests. And I would ask the audience to go ahead and make your way across to the reception and give our guests a chance to get their microphones off, and they'll be joining you there in a minute. And Tim will be signing his book over there.
That was pretty sobering. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. You get back into the stage. Oh, okay.